To the live stream. I'm Father Roderick, and it is time to record my weekly show. And I can finally do that again in this office because, as I explained last week, I was stupid enough to put like a beta version of the new operating system, Catalina, on my usual iMac that I use for streaming. And fortunately, someone in the chat suggested, well, why don't you use your laptop for streaming? My laptop, my MacBook Air, still runs the regular operating system, which is still compatible with Ecamm. I notified people over at Ecamm of the problem, but they haven't really responded yet. Maybe they don't work with the beta of Catalina, but hopefully they'll be prepared for what happens if all of a sudden the official version comes out and it breaks everything. That would be a shame. So I'm using the MacBook to stream, which also means I can see your reactions, and that's cool because that always makes me feel that I actually have an audience. Although right now, not many people are watching. Adam is there. That's also because I'm recording this a little bit earlier than normal. Normally, I'll be at the computer around 3 in the afternoon. Because I'm still recovering, I want to go back home earlier today. So that's why I'm recording now. Hey, Raskul the Raptor, welcome to the chat. So that means that most of my international audience is probably still in bed, enjoying a good night's sleep. We're not going to wake them up, but they can watch this afterwards. That's the advantage. So I'm going to start my show, and I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter than normal. And then after the show, of course, I'll come back to the comments. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of my weekly show. I'm Father Roderick, still recovering from a little medical adventure, but well enough to sit in front of the microphone and entertain you for, half an hour, maybe a little bit more. Lots of things to talk about, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. This episode is brought to you thanks to my patrons, and thanks to their monthly support, I can bring you these shows, these podcasts, and also my YouTube shows without advertisements. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's so annoying to every time have to skip forward, sometimes 4 or 5 minutes in some of the tech shows. They just keep going on and on and on. It's the same for YouTube. There's so many YouTubers that nowadays just have these plugs for services, for stuff you have to buy. Sometimes it just takes 4 or 5 minutes because it's like a taped endorsement. And it is annoying, and I'm so glad I don't have to do advertisements. If you want to support me and to keep this advertisement free, consider joining the patrons over at patreon.com/Father Roderick. They get an extra podcast every week just for as a thank you for their support.
Do you know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
So as I mentioned in the intro, I'm still recovering a little bit from my my generalized infection as a result of a kidney stone. I had to go back to the doctor, to the hospital even last week because they were not really reassured. They still thought that I had too much pain. So I had a good conversation with one of the doctors there. And basically he told me this is going to take a bit longer than we initially thought. So after you finished the antibiotics, your body will still probably need a couple of weeks to completely recover. Until then, no running, no walking for longer periods. Try to rest as much as possible. And I would prefer to take 10 pills a day rather than hearing that I have to take it easy and do things slowly and not do too much, because it's just in my nature. This past weekend, I overdid it, and I had to pay the price already on Sunday. I kind of regretted that I did so much the day before. I was going to talk about that a little bit later on. My sister came to visit with her family, so I wanted to clean the house, and also I had procrastinated on a couple of things. Notably, I wanted to move the PC that I use for streaming, mostly for when I'm streaming video games. Wanted to move that to the room next to the Lego room. And so I did that on Saturday evening, and that is, of course, the worst thing you can do, like hard physical exercise when your body can't take it. So on Sunday, it was really painful. Mass was long, and I had to stand, and the rest of the day, I was just wiped out. I'm still a little bit shaky from that. So I'm going to do my best to stay as calm as possible this upcoming week, only do the strict necessary stuff. I talked a little bit about that in the walk that you can also listen to on Tridio.com. It requires me to think about my priorities. What is truly necessary, and what are things that I just have to let go or postpone, or not everything that's on my to-do list needs to be done right away. And so it's harder than I thought to follow up on what my doctor told me to do, but I'm doing my best. I'm also watching a lot of Netflix and a lot of Disney Plus, telling myself, hey, this is part of the therapy, right? I need to take it easy, not move. So I did watch, fortunately also for you, a couple of series and movies, because otherwise I would have nothing to talk about here on the show during my segment about movies and TV shows. So there is some really great stuff at the horizon that I want to talk about. All has to do with Star Trek.
Not like movies.
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl, and that kid sees dead people, and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. I'm gonna give it to you.
If there's one reason for me to keep my Netflix subscription, even though we already have Disney Plus, and it is really, really, really cool. I can't tell you how much I enjoy Disney Plus and the overall quality of the experience. I find the user interface much easier to use than Netflix. There are some minor gripes that I have, especially if you want to turn on the subtitles. That is kind of counterintuitive how you have to switch those on. I'm sure that they will iron out all those little problems based on some feedback. Although it's funny, they do a test in the Netherlands. So you'd think they'd be interested in our feedback, but no. I guess this is just a hardware kind of a technical test, but they don't really need the input from the Dutch about their user interface or even about the contents of what they're offering. Notably, I had a discussion the other day, or a talk, totally out of the blue, with the main actor of the Ewok movies. You may remember that after Return of the Jedi came out, Return of Jedi, of course, introduced the Ewoks, a highly merchandisable creature for Lucasfilm. And then based on the success of Return of the Jedi, they created two movies that actually in the United States went straight to tape, I think, straight to VHS. Were never aired or never published in movie theaters. However, in the Netherlands, in parts of Europe, those movies were actually in. Also, you could watch them in theaters, and I'm pretty sure that I watched at least the first Ewok movie somewhere around my birthday. I asked my brother, who has a tremendous memory for stuff like this, and he said, well, yeah, I kind of vaguely remember that you went to see it either on your birthday or you went to see it with a friend of yours. I'd have fond memories of that first Ewok movie. Well, it turns out the main actor contacted me because he'd seen my little video about the trial that's going on in the Netherlands from Disney Plus, and asking me if it was correct that the Ewok movies were not on the service. And I checked, double-checked, and indeed, no Ewok movies. and then we kind of discussed a little bit. There was some other stuff missing, and it's almost as if Lucasfilm / Disney is trying to forget about those Ewok movies. So I encouraged him to keep on. He's doing what you call that? Where you gather signatures. My brain on Monday morning is like a fog. A petition. He launched an online petition. I'll link to it in the show notes, where you can sign it, and it's a plea to Disney to bring those Ewok movies to Disney Plus. There apparently is also an Ewok animated series that I really wasn't aware of. That one is also missing. Basically, when we were talking. I told him, well, why don't you just contact Warwick Davis, who is still in, constantly working with Lucasfilm. He is also in those movies, of course, as Wicket. And I have a theory, and maybe completely wrong, but if I were Disney, I would bring back Wicket to Episode 9. And here's how. We know from the trailer, so this is not really a spoiler. We know that at one point they have to go back to Endor, because we see this image of the second Death Star in this, submerged in the waters of the seas. So that has to be on Endor. If they go back to Endor, then of course why wouldn't you bring back the most iconic Ewok? And also the breakthrough role for Warwick Davis, who is still very much one of the ambassadors of the Disney brand and of the Star Wars brand, and reintroduce a new generation to these highly marketable, fluffy Ewoks. And this time you could do them, even better than in Return of the Jedi. Plus, that would open an entire opportunity to re-promote all the existing Ewok stuff. So I have just this idea, since we see Lando, why not bring back Wicket? I'm going to be very disappointed if they don't, because after all, they're on Endor. If I go and visit Boxtel, I go see my mom. It's an old friend. And the actor is still available, and of course they can use that to let him go to all these conventions and promote Star Wars. There's just such an obvious thing to do. Anyway, I haven't heard of it, so this may be one of the surprises of Episode 9, or they haven't thought of it, and we'll never see the Ewoks again. Anyway, so I hope that Warwick Davis wants to also kind of push this online petition so that Disney listens and puts this on Disney Plus. My idea is that either Disney wants to forget about those maybe not so successful movies, but it's still part of Star Wars history. It's like the Christmas special. Nobody. It's like Voldemort. You don't speak that name, but it is still part of the history that led to Star Wars the way it is nowadays. The Mandalorian. The entire series would not have existed if it weren't for the holiday special. Because it was during that Christmas holiday special that we saw an animated short that introduced the character of Boba Fett in his iconic mask and everything. And that costume later on developed into a whole backstory about these Mandalorian warriors, which now is the basis for the Mandalorian TV series. So I'm thinking you just restore that thing. It's awful. It's really awful, but it's still part of Star Wars history, and we want to see it. And the same is true for those Ewok movies. They were not the best, but I remember them as being entertaining enough, and they were geared at kids. I want to rewatch those. Apparently, they're currently on Amazon Prime in the United States, I think. So maybe there's some other stuff missing also. Some Disney material that you can still watch on Netflix in certain countries, although most of the Netflix stuff is gone now, and on Amazon Prime. So maybe there is just an exclusive contract that Disney has to wait for before they can bring that back to the to the barn in a certain way. So we'll just have to wait and see. Then, last week, we saw 2 new trailers for Star Trek. One was another trailer for Star Trek Picard, this time reintroducing us to Riker, which was absolutely fantastic. I love the way they do that. So basically, Picard goes and visits his old friend Riker, who is now an old man. And in reality also, these actors have really aged. And then we get some context about why Data is also in Star Trek Picard. And you see at one point what looks to me like a dream sequence. Or actually, it is a dream sequence. You can tell from the trailer because Picard wakes up. And what was really blowing me away is you see both Picard and Data in their old uniforms, their classic TNG uniforms. And it is uncanny how much that uniform all of a sudden transforms Picard into Picard. It's really, really cool. I love that trailer. It's very different in tone from Discovery because we also saw the new trailer, the first trailer for the 3rd season of Star Trek Discovery. In case you haven't watched that series yet, definitely go watch it if you can because it's really awesome Star Trek. It's very different from anything that Star Trek has done before, but it's really good. It holds up. It's a good actors, solid scripts, amazing special effects. But in this 3rd season, so the first 2 seasons took part in a time frame before the original Star Trek series. And so it's after Star Trek Enterprise, I think, but before the original series. And so in the 3rd season, they're propelled forward in time, and now they're 7 centuries past the last thing that we saw, I guess, in The Next Generation or Voyager, Deep Space. Deep Space Nine is probably the most far ahead that we've gotten into the canon timeline. But now Discovery is going to bring us way into the future, and the trailer looks amazing and very cool. You see the same characters that you know and love, but this time they have to fix the future, and you see some glimpses that something hints at that the Federation of Planets is now different and smaller. And so maybe there's a lot of fallout. Of course, science fiction, if it's good science fiction, it reflects our current political reality as well. So maybe there's fragmentation also in the galaxy, and the Discovery, this crew from the past with all their ideals also. This is much more from the original Roddenberry idealism. Maybe they bring that to the future, which would, I think, be a very cool storytelling device to reflect what we all hope for in our society as well. Our countries are so polarized now. There's so much opposition. Everything falls apart. That's how it feels. We can't even trust the presidents or anything because they're constantly spinning things. Everything is spin. What is the truth? It's all muddy, and people are only fighting wars online. The things that we thought would bring the universe together, like the internet, right? In the early years of the internet, I was so enthusiastic, so positive, like, well, this is going to bridge so many gaps, and it's going to bring people from all over the world into one big family. Cultures are going to be able to exchange, and we can learn from each other. And look where we are now. The internet is basically a place where with open warfare. It's like a civil war in the digital realm. And of course, there's also a lot of things to appreciate on the internet and a lot of good people there. But it's absolutely not the ideal utopic future that I kind of expected when the thing was brand new. Well, in a way, Star Trek is struggling with the same reality. It was invented in the early 70s, of course. Gene Roddenberry had this very utopian view of the future. There would be no more money because there's no more money, no more wars. There were actually specific rules for the writers that among the crew of the Enterprise, and then later on the new Enterprise, etc., there couldn't be conflict between the members of the crew. So no conflicts between, let's say, Picard and Riker, or Data and Troy, and the only character who sometimes kind of got a little bit riled up was Worf. But then he was a Klingon, so you could explain that. It's just his character. And the writers of the series have struggled so much because, of course, storytelling is all about conflict and the resolution of conflict. But if you can't have conflict to begin with, what kind of stories are you going to tell? So, but it all stemmed from this utopian view of Gene Roddenberry of a future where he wanted Star Trek to be an example, something to look forward to. It's this. You see the same thing in the way Disney portrayed the future in their theme parks, where it was kind of the Jetsons, right? We have flying cars and everybody's kind, and no more world wars, and the technological innovations are going to make everybody happy. There will be food and technology for all to enjoy. Well, the reality, of course, is that the world has changed, and you can't get away anymore with stories where everybody is, happy and there's no more conflict. And you see that Star Trek has evolved and has changed already in Deep Space Nine. I'm currently watching, I'm binge watching Deep Space Nine, and I'm so enjoying it. There's still some flawed episodes, and it's kind of a low budget show, and it shows. But there is also so much to enjoy. There's some really, really good stories. And you can tell that Deep Space Nine is already evolving towards more danger. There's the Dominion that is threatening the stability of the entire interstellar society. And in Discovery, they completely broke the rules. There was a lot of strife. There's a lot of conflict on the bridge between people. You've got like the evil versions of certain characters that then become part of the rest of the crew. There's a lot of conflict, and I think what they now do with Discovery is super interesting because they're also breaking this idea that the future is always better than the present. And I would dare to say that the current present that we live in is in many ways worse than the time that I grew up, where I grew up in the 80s, and there was this optimism. But now we live in a world where, our societies are more and more unstable. There is this ongoing threat of manipulation, of government control over, our freedom and our liberties. There is a tremendous religious fallout with, of course, huge consequences for morality in general and how people behave, because religion often has guided people to make the right choices. Well, if that falls away, what is going to be our moral beacon? So in many ways, what was the future when I grew up is not the utopian future that I thought it would be. And instead, and Discovery does kind of the same thing. They bring us to that future, and they show us that, I think they're going to show us that the future is actually in dire need of fixing. And the crew of Discovery is going to do that, thereby, I think, appealing to our idealism. The worse the situation gets, you see this all over the world, the more I hear from people, why can't we go back to civility, to being kind to each other, to build a better future? Look at the entire movement that you see now among teenagers that are going on these strikes for the environment. You see this desire, and it's very idealistic, of this new younger generation to fix the world, to really stop what we're doing now because we're destroying everything, and making a better future, being very much aware that the future depends on what we do now. And my hope is always that there is this pendulum movement. So right now we're on one side, But gravity will pull us back to the center. Maybe we'll go to the other side as well, just like you had many times in history when certain tendencies are then overcompensated on the other side. But there are signs, I think, that people will always. It's because we have a conscience. We want to make the world better. We are, I think, in the deepest parts of our heart, we're meant to love each other and to build up the world instead of only, destroying everything out of selfishness. And of course, there are many exceptions to the rule, but I think in general, mankind will always try to make things better again. And the worse the situation is, the more motivation there is to rebuild. The same is happening right now in the church. I see that a lot. For a long time, everybody was just like, the church is disappearing and it's over and we have to close our churches. And now all of a sudden, for a couple of years now, we've seen this kind of renewal in the parishes. There are a couple of books. You've got Rebuild, for instance, and Divine Renovation that are hugely popular. Those books have been translated in so many languages. Even in the Netherlands, there are now a pretty big number of parishes that are really trying to completely rethink the way they do things and refocusing on faith and helping people to become disciples of Jesus and realizing that if we just go on the way we've been doing things for decades, then it's going to fall apart because that's what's happening right now. So we have to regroup, we have to rethink and go back to the sources of who we are and what we're supposed to do in order to make a better future. So maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that during the Peculiar Bunch.
Catholics rock!
Here on the Peculiar Bunch, we're always happy to tell you everything you always wanted to know about Catholics and their strange religious habits from time to time.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
So, speaking about changes and the need to constantly reform, that's kind of what's happening right now in the heart of the church in the Vatican.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
This past Sunday, Pope Francis created 13 new cardinals, most of which are coming from parts of the world that were not represented that well in the College of Cardinals. Cardinals are bishops, usually. Well, they have to be bishops according to canon law. So there was one of the cardinals that was created yesterday was ordained a bishop the day before. It's like, well, we need to first fix that. We need to level you up before we can create a cardinal. So, and you see that Pope Francis is really attentive to restoring a certain balance among the cardinals. Cardinals, the College of Cardinals, used to be the archpriests of Rome. So the people that would work with the Pope to manage the parishes of Rome. And then later on, over time, the cardinals became more and more important and were chosen from countries from all over the world. And it's the College of Cardinals, right from the beginning, that chose the new Pope. And usually it's one of the cardinals. Now, in the past, there was a very huge dominance of European bishops. If you look at a country like Italy, has hundreds of dioceses. It's incredible. It's not a very big country, but traditionally had so many cities where the archbishop of that city automatically became a cardinal. Well, Pope Francis has broken with that tradition and made sure that we have way more cardinals from Africa, from Asia, from South America, which of course irks kind of more some of the more established parts of the church. It's like, oh, all of a sudden we don't have a cardinal anymore. But I think in general this is just reflecting the reality of the Catholic Church. It's growing the most in Africa and Asia. Why not reflect that in the composition of the College of Cardinals? So it means it's now about 50-50. About half of the cardinals have been created by Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict, and then the other half has been created by Pope Francis. Also, of course, heightens the chances that the next pope will also not be an Italian or maybe not even a European cardinal. We may have an Asian pope or an African pope. That's bound to happen one of these centuries. You never know. However, there is now going after that creation of these 13 cardinals. The Pope also inaugurated the start of a very important meeting in the Vatican. It's a synod about a specific region that is part of the Catholic world, and that is the Amazon region. The Amazon region is a Christian region where there are many Catholics, but also a region with many challenges. Poverty is a huge challenge. The ongoing fires of the Amazon forests out of economic gain, that's kind of what's behind it. They're burning down the forests to create cheap soil for grain or corn or whatever, or for cattle. I think cattle is the biggest problem right now because there is so much meat consumption that is international. So a lot of the cattle that is raised in the Amazon goes to China, which is kind of doesn't make sense. So it's all interlinked, and that's one of the things that Pope Francis has tried to explain in Laudato Si, his encyclical, where he shows that the environment is not just the environment; it is also linked to all other parts of our society and our culture. And if we neglect the environment, people are going to pay the price for that. And the same thing if you don't fix hunger and poverty, then people may turn to natural resources and destroy them just out of sheer poverty, which is happening a lot. So the Amazon Synod wants to talk about the entirety of the problems, and to look at what Catholics can do to better the situation and to help. One of the problems is that these Catholics that live there have almost no resources. It's a very poor church, but it's also a church that's very poor in ministers. And so one of the hotly debated topics, let's say in the preparations before that synod, was, of course, how can we get more priests? One solution, of course, is to import priests from other countries. But that is more and more difficult. We notice it too here in the Netherlands, where for a while we've had a lot of priests from other countries that, like South America, African priests, Polish priests, other parts of Europe, that came here to run parishes. Not always a success, I have to say, but of course very generous from these young men to become missionaries in the countries that used to send missionaries to their home countries. But it's not a solution because of the immigration laws. It's more and more difficult to get permission to work here and to settle here in the Netherlands. We've had a problem in our own diocese with a community of Brazilian missionaries that came here, and they were sent back because of these strict immigration laws. So that is a problem also. The number of vocations is starting to dwindle also in countries like Poland, where the Catholic Church, I think, is in a big crisis, or maybe on the verge of a huge crisis, which means that also there the number of vocations is shrinking. So it's and that is true also for the Amazon. You can't just say, well, we'll just send priests from all over the world to the Amazon to cater to these Catholics there, usually live in very remote places, because those priests are not available anymore and they're needed elsewhere. So that's why in the preparatory documents, the team that was kind of thinking about talking points, one of the things that they raised was, well, we may need to rethink the criteria for admission to the priesthood. The priesthood in the Western world is mostly based on, the priests are chosen from celibate men. And celibacy itself was something that has not always been part of the priesthood. In fact, Jesus chose his most important apostles among married men. St. Peter was married. There were several other apostles that were married and maybe had families as well. Not all of them. St. Paul, for instance, was not. So there's always been, in these early centuries, a reality in the church where priests were both sometimes living celibate lives, sometimes had a family. But in the Middle Ages, this was a request that came from the people themselves. They wanted priests to be celibate. Bishops have almost always been chosen from celibate priests, but they really wanted to have celibacy as a general requirement for the priesthood, and that had to do with a number of things. For instance, families were sometimes made it more difficult for a priest to be available. There were also priests that were having illegitimate children, or there were all sorts of problems with their marriages. And so there were a whole number of reasons that at one point the Universal Church came to the conclusion we need to make celibacy not optional but compulsory for the priesthood. But that was a decision that stemmed from a certain situation back then. And I will be the first one to say how much I value celibacy as a state that you can live in, and it can be a very fulfilling life. And so I think this will always remain. However, I can also understand that in situations like the Amazon, the church may reflect upon other criteria. One of which is an old concept, which is called viri probati. Viri probati are literally tested men that have proven themselves. Probare, it's to prove, to test. And so this is an idea that actually exists in certain other parts of the church, where priests are chosen from somewhat older men who, for instance, have already children, have raised a family. The children are now on their own. And these older men with a lot of life experience, after, of course, appropriate theological formation, can be ordained and can work as priests. That is kind of what the Synod wants to think about. Now, as you can imagine, this would be a huge change for the church, and many people are not really in favor of that because they're afraid that if you open the priesthood up for married men as well, no one will choose celibacy anymore. Personally, I'm not convinced. I think that living a celibate life is a vocation, is a distinct vocation from the priesthood. In fact, if someone says, I want to become a priest, but I'm not that certain about celibacy, I would say, don't become a priest, because it is really important that you experience celibacy not as something that restrains you or limits you, but as your vocation. That's what God calls you to live. Otherwise, you can't be a happy priest. So I think I'm not that worried, and I can also imagine that the option of viri probati would be a solution in some parts of the world where the sacramentality of the church is endangered, which is also happening right here in my own country. We have so few priests. I see it in my own parish. I have 2 parishes, 15 churches, 3 priests. Right now, but it's very obvious that in a while we'll only have 2 or 1 priest for 15 churches. So that means that most Catholics will not be able to celebrate the Eucharist or the sacraments on a regular basis. That is basically unplugging the church. We need the sacraments. We need the Eucharist. It's our oxygen. And so when that happens and there are no other solutions, then maybe it is time to rethink the criteria of admission to the priesthood. I'm not sure if that will solve anything. I think the whole question is very complex, and there are many different reasons why we don't get enough vocations. but I'm all for just let's think about this. Let's pray. Let's ask the Holy Spirit to guide us in this. And if He does, then why worry? Why? The Pope Francis, by the way, is not a fan of optional celibacy. He said, I'm very much in favor of keeping celibacy as one of the requirements for the priesthood. But then again, he's open enough to say, well, but I'm just the Pope. We need to think this, just like the institution of celibacy, of compulsory celibacy, was a decision of the universal church after long deliberations and lots of prayers. Changes to that rule should also be something that we make, a decision that we should make as a universal church. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but it's interesting to see that things are changing and that we need to think creatively about the future of the church. Just like on the parish level, we need to change what we do, because what we're doing obviously is not working anymore for a younger generation. And the solutions may be multiple. I know there are lots of people that say, well, if only we go back to Latin Mass and the old rite and go back to the way the church was 100 years ago, then that will bring back the young people. I personally doubt that. It may be good for some parts of the younger generation, but it's not an easy solution to all the problems. It never is. Nostalgia is good, but it can also be a trap to not really innovate. But I would say, well, we're not alone in this. We're not the captain of the ship. God is. So we can always ask Him.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
I am reading a very cool science fiction book written by John Scalzi. I really enjoy his books. He wrote a book about Red Church, which is funny, really funny. It's about the characters in a TV show, in a science fiction TV show, very much like Star Trek. And about their lives in between the episodes. They don't realize that they're actually in a TV show. They think it's real. For them, it's real. It's very, very creative writing. Well, before he wrote Red Shirts, he wrote Old Man's War, and I'm listening to it thanks to Alexa, who was reading that to me. Hopefully, I didn't activate your personal electronic assistant. By the way, I've noticed that the Alexa device, how do you call them, the Echo, is so much more sensitive. And it's triggered so often when I'm not even saying the trigger word. So compared to the Google Assistant, anyway. But what the Amazon digital assistant does really well is to read books. So I'm listening to the voice. There's only one voice right now. Hopefully that will also change. So my personal assistant is reading Old Man's War, and it's a great story. Wow, I love it. It's about this old guy. He's 75 years old. Well, that's not very old, but it's still old enough. And 10 years ago, he gave his DNA profile to the government because they have technology now to bring old people back into, as soldiers. And 10 years later, his wife has just died. He enlists for the army at 75 years old. So what they do is, after a whole number of tests, they take his DNA, his brain, his consciousness, and put them in a new body, a younger body, which is an enhanced body. So it's much stronger, etc., etc. So you've got this old man living in a young body. It's a little bit like what Cameron did with Avatar, where the soldier is actually remote controlling this blue Navi. This is kind of similar, but then you get, of course, this very cool dynamic of you've got real young soldiers, and then you've got these old people that are actually kind of reincarnated in younger bodies, but they have their old man attitude. So it's a great concept. It's the first book of a whole series, so I'm not sure if I'll read all the other books, but this one was on sale on the Amazon Kindle store. So, and I'm so far, I'm enjoying it. Scalzi has a very easy way of writing. It's a little bit like Crichton, you just keep reading. It's a page turner. It's nothing too challenging, but it's just a cool concept, very creative idea, and an enjoyable science fiction story. So I can recommend that. Since we're already on the topic of science fiction.
We are on the cutting edge of tech.
Oh, that's technology. I need to have this jingle. Let's talk a little bit more about sci-fi, because there is some Star Wars news. Nothing spoilerish, of course, but I just want to talk a little bit more about George Lucas and the current trilogy of movies. And, of course, last week I mentioned that Kevin Feige is also going to produce a movie, and there may be some interesting rumors about what that has to do with George Lucas.
I see aliens. Little aliens from outer space.
And how are things in outer Plutonia?
How many times have I told you not to wear your space boots in the house?
For the shape I'm in, you can donate my body to science fiction.
Get your suit on! We need you!
So I don't know, I forgot if I mentioned that already on the last show, but George Lucas was not very happy with The Force Awakens. Actually, he was so disappointed that he didn't want to come to the premiere. And they convinced him to still show up. And then he said very safe things. Interesting, I think the fans are going to like it. But actually, in reality, he didn't like it at all. And part of the reason was that he had wrote 3 outlines. There has been some news, like twice in the lead up to the final takeover by Disney of Lucasfilm. Twice the party split up. The first time, I think it was Disney that walked away. The second time, it was George Lucas that walked away. And the main source of contention was that George Lucas wanted to control the future of his stories. He wanted to be able to greenlight or not what Disney would do with the franchise. Kind of fits his character. He's very much a micromanager. I think it's one of the reasons that the prequels were not that good, because George Lucas had free reign over the story and over the actors, and he's just not the best director. And he's a genius when it comes to ideas. The execution is often a bit lackluster, and the success of a number of the Star Wars movies is not thanks to George Lucas, but it's despite George Lucas. So he wanted to have creative control over the future of the brand, which for Disney was unacceptable. They knew that if George Lucas would constantly be looking over their shoulder, they couldn't be free. Plus, how much can you manage? George Lucas is not the youngest man anymore, so they would really be in a situation maybe comparable to what's happening in with the Tolkien estate, where people are just eager to expand upon the world and the world building that Tolkien did, but there's this Tolkien estate that constantly has to greenlight everything, wants money for every single thing they change. So it makes it much harder to make this a commercial endeavor that works. And so that is why twice the parties split up. And then finally, Disney was able to convince George Lucas to to hand over Lucasfilm for the $4 billion, because they said, well, we'll just buy your outlines for the sequel movies. And George Lucas thought, hey, they're finally this story that I've always wanted to tell is going to be made. And I would have loved to make it myself, but at least they've bought my treatments. And then they just dumped the treatments in the garbage can. J.J. Abrams looked at it with Kathleen Kennedy, and they both came to the conclusion that we can't do this. This is not gonna work for the fans. And I think they're right. They were probably very right, because it would be kind of like this Ant-Man-like story where you would go into this microbiotic world. I think I've already explained this. But anyway, the Wills being these creatures, microscopically small creatures that would dictate the universe. It's just such an outlandish story, and also visually, how are you going to do this? This is so different from what Star Wars has done before. Kind of like the prequels were also very off-putting for a lot of the original Star Wars fans, because it was so political. And I'm now watching the Clone Wars, and I'm in the second season now. And it's also sometimes really dragging the series down. It's this effort to keep it very political, just like I think the weakest part of the prequels. And this series shines the moment they focus more on Ahsoka and Anakin and the relationships, and the challenges really don't matter. And I certainly couldn't care less about trading routes, which is like every time it's these Nemoidians that we have nothing to report, and it's come on, let's forget about the politics. Just give us a good Star Wars story. So it's getting there, but you can tell there is a lot of influence of George Lucas in the first seasons of the Clone Wars. So, it's not guaranteed that if George Lucas has an idea, that's automatically an idea that we as Star Wars fans would appreciate. So Lucas was very disappointed that according to him now these stories will never be told. Hold my beer. We heard that Kevin Feige came on board. And there is now, I'm not sure if it's a rumor or if it's speculation, but that Kevin Feige is tasked to do something with those original scripts from George Lucas. And to not make just one movie, but to make at least two. And I'm thinking when in the movie industry they are talking about 2 movies, there will be 3 movies. But what if Kevin Feige was brought on board to do the impossible, to make that strange, outlandish story, to somehow turn that into a movie that is watchable and enjoyable? If there's one person that can do it, it's Kevin Feige. Look at the MCU. Look at how weird that story actually is. It's about gems, about these stones, magical stones that if you put them in a glove, give you the power to erase half of the mankind. What kind of story is that? If you read that on paper, you're like, this is never going to fly. This is the most stupid story that we've ever heard of. And yet, it turned into this phenomenon. But if you look at the basic storyline, it is ridiculous. You've got Ant-Man also. It's like the way they've woven his adventure in this micro space and then bringing him back, and basically he's one of the people that saves the day in the end. It's so masterfully done that I'm thinking maybe Disney was like, well, they pull it off with the MCU. Why not? Why not build a bridge to George Lucas? And why not try this? Maybe with a guy like Kevin Feige, we can make this work. And of course, it will still be very different from what George Lucas wanted to do, but it is still George Lucas. So why not give it a try? And it could enable them to do something that is both completely different from what they've done before, but because it's got Kevin Feige, they know it's going to be good. And they can also tell the fans, well, this is sanctioned by George Lucas. This is you can't get more original than this. How cool would that be if Kevin Feige would go into this backstory of the Wills and the midichlorians and somehow make it work? There where I think if George Lucas would have made those, and those would have been the sequels, Star Wars would be dead. No one would care for Star Wars anymore. But I think now that they have done a different conclusion to the Skywalker story, and I'm still very hopeful that it will be an excellent conclusion, why not go back? They have these treatments anyway. They paid for it. And try to bring in the biggest wizard that we have when it comes to storytelling, Kevin Feige, and then turn that into something that works. I don't know. I'm just curious.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Just plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
So as I mentioned before, on Saturday, I did something that I shouldn't have done, and that is to move my entire PC setup and my YouTube setup to another room. So it's now in what I call the common room, the Gryffindor common room, because it looks a little bit like a Gryffindor common room. I also put some Harry Potter decorations in that room. It's not finished yet, but it's getting there. And that's a really nice background for when I'm streaming video games. Like the other day, I was streaming Lord of the Rings Online. I did an attempt to stream Euro Trucker, which was not a big success. And then yesterday evening, I did some Lego Star Wars, Lego The Force Awakens. And I finally figured out how to do streaming of the game and seeing the chat at the same time. I'm not there yet because I'm using a television as a monitor. It's basically because my eyes are getting worse, and the monitors that I had were too small, so I had to constantly wear glasses, and it's very annoying. So I'm like, I'll just get a big TV and use that as a monitor, so I don't have to wear glasses. But it's an HD TV, so the resolution is still regular HD. Most of the games I play are also in HD, and I stream in HD. So it means there's no more room for, let's say, a breakout window with the chat. And the chat, for me, is essential to what I do on YouTube. Basically, everything I do is a pretext to be able to chat with my audience. So if I can't react to what people are saying while I'm gaming, then that doesn't work. So anyway, maybe the solution would be to, instead of using a regular HD TV, to replace it with a 4K TV. They're not that expensive anymore, so that I can then have multiple windows open, and I can have the game window that would be HD, and then I would have plenty of place for all the streaming software. And one of the other things that I've been working on this weekend is I want to automate more. It's a really big hassle to go live on YouTube, to post messages, to change cameras, etc. So a while back, I bought a small device called the Elgato Stream Deck, and it's basically a USB-powered collection of buttons that you can program. And the buttons have little icons that you can change. It's a very, very cool little device. It has got great software, and you can basically program any keys like macros. So every key can do several things at once. So now I've linked it to my streaming software, and with one press of a button, in theory, I can go live, and I can, with one press of a button, post a Twitter message. Facebook didn't work for some reason, so I don't think there's Facebook integration yet, but it is already making it much easier and lowering, for me, the technical threshold to stream. And I've got a feeling that gaming is, for me, also a way to reach new audiences. I'm still doing that on YouTube right now, but YouTube has kind of let go of the gaming community when it comes to streaming. It's sad, but they had their own gaming platform, like a sub-platform, from just like they had the platform for kids, or they still have that. They gave up on that, and but most people now, when they play video games, they're not doing that on YouTube. They're doing it on Twitch, twitch.tv, or there's a new service from Microsoft. What was it called again? Microsoft gaming platform. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's not Hello, Microsoft gaming platform. It's not Stadia, Azure. Oh well. Streaming. Now I want to know. No, the streaming games. Wow. Oh, it's hard to find. I thought it was called Hello or something like that. But anyway, they took over one of the major streaming guys that went from their it's kind of the standard streaming platform on the Xbox One as well. So anyway, it doesn't matter. So I'm considering maybe moving the gaming streaming to Twitch or to that Microsoft service. I can't understand that. Well, I'm not going to find it. Forget about it. I get so hung up on things like this. Having a little device like that helps. I've also tried to improve the lighting. So I watched a tutorial about how to get better lighting for when I'm streaming. That's also important for this show, because I'm always streaming this live. And I basically have no lighting here in this room. It's just ceiling LED lights, very cheap LED lighting, and it doesn't look very good. So I also want to figure that out here, how I can create just a better overall look of the streaming, because that's kind of it's a necessity. Everyone has great looking streams. I don't want to stay behind, but it's all a matter of focus. So now I've finally had some time to organize that. So if you want to check out my streams, either the Lego streams or the gaming streams, make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, which is Father Roderick. I think on Twitch I'm still Pixel Priest, and I may have to change that into Father Roderick as well, just to kind of make that a general handle that you can search for anywhere. Having multiple brands is not a good idea. Just like I had in the past, I had Geek Priest and Media Priest and Father Roderick, and it just became this mess. I think it should just be Father Roderick everywhere. So, but I'll look into that, and I'll keep you posted, of course. That's it for this episode of my show. I thought I was going to do a shorter show, but it's still an hour that you'll never get back. I apologize. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. If you want to join them, check out patreon.com/Father Roderick. And I will see you next week. Take care, and may the Force be with you. Okay, that's number 1. And now I'm going to record the after show. Hey, it's Father Roderick, and you are listening to the after show, which means that you are either watching this live on YouTube or you're one of my patrons, for which I am very, very thankful. I did an experiment this week. Instead of streaming my show in the afternoon, normally I do that around 3 p.m. my time, which is, I think, 9 Eastern time. And then I usually have quite a few people from North America watching. This time, I recorded my show, or I streamed my show in the morning around noon, I think. And all of a sudden, I've got people from Australia and from different parts of the world watching this live, which is a lot of fun. And also some new viewers. That's the advantage of streaming on YouTube, is I've got this big audience. Actually, yesterday, my YouTubers, my followers, told me that I had gone over 20,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is crazy because just a few days ago I checked and it was only 18,000. So we've in a couple of days we have 2,000 more viewers, and some of them are now watching this for the first time, and they're like, "Hey, I know you from that Star Wars trailer reaction, and you're streaming live. That's how cool is that?" So that is a lot of fun. And then, of course, they're watching behind me. I've got this cupboard, this IKEA cupboard, and it's got lots of geeky stuff there. And people are like, what do I see there? It's a little bit blurry. So is that Superman? Is that Mickey Mouse? Yes, it is. And there's a statuette that most people think is the Virgin Mary, but it's actually Saint Therese of Lisieux, who's the patron saint for the mission. Kind of what I'm doing is I always feel like a digital missionary. Here's BB-8. That's a remote-controlled BB-8. I actually also have R2-D2, the remote-controlled R2-D2 by Sphero. And they were dumping it. Basically, Sphero is no longer going to do these Star Wars things. So they sold the R2 unit, which is much bigger than the BB-8 one, I think I bought it for 30 euros, which is absolutely a steal. Next to BB-8 is a teacup in the shape of the TARDIS, because Doctor Who. And then behind that, you see a Pez dispenser with a Death Star on it. And I really value that one because it is signed by Carrie Fisher. I didn't know she signed Pez dispensers. I didn't watch her signing it, but someone else had it signed and sent it to me. So that is a relic. And then behind that, I can't even tell from here. It's probably a 360 camera. Yeah, it's a 360 camera, and then behind it is Darth Vader. And then on the upper shelf, I've got a prop from what's the movie called? The Iron Giant. The Iron Giant, an IKEA fake plant, and then I've got the cast of The Simpsons. All sorts of. They came from Happy Meals, and one of my listeners, sent it to me a couple of years ago. And then on the lower shelf, there is the box set for Stargate, the original Stargate series. I've watched, I think, 4 seasons, so I still need to finish that. But first, I want to finish Deep Space Nine and Clone Wars. and then maybe Rebels and Star Wars Resistance. So I still have a lot of things to watch. And I haven't even finished the 3rd season of Stranger Things. I need to get sick more often, so I have more time to watch TV. Oh boy. Let me go through the chat and see if there are any questions there that I can answer. Bricks by Thomas asks if I've seen any recent movies in the theater or in the cinema. No, actually I haven't. I have this ongoing subscription to my movie theater, but I hardly have time to go to the movies. So, no. And someone else asked me if I've already seen The Joker, which is doing very well at the box office, but I'm kind of wary. I'm not sure if that's the kind of movie that I'm going to enjoy. I'm sure that it's very well acted, but I've heard that so many people are walking out of the theaters just because they can't stomach it. And I'm kind of queasy. I don't like violence. I don't like too much negativity. So I'm kind of on the fence. I'll probably just see it, but I'm not sure if I will appreciate it. Have you already finished The Dark Crystal? No, I haven't. I've watched 2 episodes only, and then I got distracted by Star Trek, which is a good distraction. I will definitely also talk about the Mandalorian episodes. I'm still kind of figuring out what to do with my Star Wars commentary. Maybe I should turn that into, its own YouTube channel or maybe a playlist on YouTube. That's when I feel most relaxed, is when I could just chat. If it has to be too produced, then it's kind of hard. So maybe I should just create a little Star Wars corner or something like that. I don't know. I'm also thinking about maybe getting a portable green screen so that if necessary, I can just put any background there, but that also requires better lighting than I currently have. So that's all for the future. Luke Skytrekker is where he lives is 4:00 in the morning. Oh my goodness! I still wanted to say hi. I appreciate that. And we've got Zivko Dimitrov from Bulgaria. How awesome is that? And Clara's Journey is there. I love the creativity of all those screen names. Samuel, who lives in Scandinavia, says, "I love your positive attitude, Father. Sometimes I just feel like giving up. Today, news broke that we had 2 Catholic priests here in Sweden that abused children in the early 2000s. I felt so sad. I can totally relate to that. It is for us priests, it's always such a shock when you hear stories like that, and you know that people are going to blame you as well, or look at you weird, and it's like, oh, the Catholic Church are all abusers and everything. But at the same time, I don't think we can let ourselves be put down by that. It's like any situation in life. You can either just despair and give up, and then nothing good comes from that. Or you can say, well, hey, but I'm here to make things better. I can do something that does build up the community and does help. And put your energy in that. Helen wants to know if they will make Ant-Man 3. I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you that, but I have no inside information. Oh, thank you, Bricks by Thomas. I was looking for the name of that gaming service, a streaming service, that kind of like a Twitch variant that Microsoft started, and I couldn't come on. I couldn't remember the name, and it's Mixer. Mixer is such a weird name. Mixer, I'm thinking of making, pancakes and cooking. Who calls a game streaming platform Mixer? Only Microsoft. Ay, ay, ay. Anywho, there's some rumors and potential spoilers about Star Wars. I'm avoiding all spoilers. I don't even want to read fan theories about the movie 9, so I just skip that. Have you read the first Wheel of Time novel, asks Jack. Yes, I have, and I tremendously enjoyed it, and I'm on the verge of starting the second book, knowing very well that if I want to read the entire series, I'm going to be 75. We've got Anita from Australia, where it's 10:30 p.m. right now. How awesome. We are so international. Briggs is going to have his exam, his final school exams in 9 days. He's very anxious. Yeah. Well, we'll be praying that you make it. If you do your job, then God will do the rest. How are you keeping up since your illness? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. Today I'm pretty tired because I worked a little bit too much during the weekend. I was planning on going home an hour ago, and that's when I realized I still need to do my podcasts. But after I'm done recording this, I'll go home. And it's mostly that I have to stay physically still. It's not about thinking, but it's just about not doing too much physical stuff. So no walking, no running, no moving furniture like I did this weekend. How stupid was I? Also, no cleaning. You know, I'll just have to wait a little bit before I clean the house again, because that also is physical exercise. No IKEA construction either. So many good things of life that I have to suspend temporarily. But I do want to get better. Still got about a week left with my antibiotics. And then I'll take a few more weeks to completely recover, and then I'm back to working and running and training for my marathon. All right, that wraps it up for this short episode of the After Show. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going home, and I will talk to you next week. That's it. Thanks for stopping by. I hope I answered all your questions. And just keep an eye on my YouTube account. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed. And maybe the next stream is going to be Lego. Who knows? It's been a while. Ciao.